Hello, violins. Today we're going to be working on page 4 of Essential Elements, book 2. We're going to be in the key of G major on this page, and then next time when we move to page 5, we will learn a different octave of G major. So we'll be starting with the low octave of G major, so let's review the notes. We go ahead and start on the G string, so your lowest string, your lowest note on the violin. So we've got open G. There is first finger is A, second finger, and this is regular high second finger, not low second finger, it's B. And then we've got C, which is third finger. So your finger pattern should look like this with a space between first finger and second finger. And then you also have the same notes on the D string that you used in the D major scale. So D, E, F sharp, G. So your finger pattern stays the same. Half step is between 2 and 3, and you're using your G string and your D string on page 4. We'll start with the G major scale. This scale is intended to be played in a round, so let's go ahead and play it together first, and then the second time through I will let you start and I'll echo you in a round. Good. Remember that when we do our scales for our daily scale practice, we generally do repeat the top note, but when we are doing it in a round, it doesn't work so well to repeat the top note. So just pay attention when you're reading the scales out of the book to notice whether they do or do not repeat that highest note of the scale. Let's go ahead and do that in a round now. I'm going to play it again. You start and I will echo you. Nicely done. Next we're going to move on to the G major arpeggio, and remember that if a scale is like a staircase, the arpeggio would be like going up the staircase but taking 2 or 3 steps at a time. So we're skipping some notes when we do the arpeggio. The notes of the G major arpeggio are G, B, D, and then we always play the G both at the bottom and at the top. Okay, so G, B, and D are the notes of the G major triad, which forms the G major arpeggio. You're going to play each note twice. Very nice. Remember that if you need to play a little bit slower to start, so if the backing track on Essential Elements Interactive is going too fast for you, there is a slow button, and it's with the controls at the right above the music, right? Kind of where the button that you push to play the song. If you go over to the other side of the controls, there's a slow button. There's also a repeat button. So if you want to repeat the same one over and over, you can click the repeat button and it'll just keep going. And if you want to slow it down, click the slow button. And once you click the slow button, it's going to stay slow until you click it again to deactivate the slow tempo. So all of the exercises will be slow until you unclick that. So you're welcome to try that. The pitch stays the same, but just the tempo gets quite a bit slower. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Number 12 is scale intervals. Now, interval is a word that we use to describe the distance between two notes. That's a really important term for music theory. So the distance between any two notes is called an interval, and we use numbers to quantify how far apart notes are. So if you're starting with the first note of the scale, in this case that's G, from the first note to the second note is called a second. From the first note to the third note is called a third. From the first note to the fourth note is called a fourth. And I think you get the idea. So the bigger the number, the larger the spaces between those notes. And then when you get up to the 8th note, we call that the octave. So in the G major scale, the 8th eighth note is also G. So when you go from one G up to the next G, you've gone through all the other notes in between. That is called an octave, which is the interval of an eighth. Every other interval we just call by the number. And so as you're reading through this one, I want you to be noticing the not just how they look, but also how they sound when you play the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, sixth, seventh, and octaves. And as we move forward, you're going to really be working on training your ears to identify these intervals, and that'll help you to play them in tune. So be very, very careful to play in tune, and what you want to be doing is really noticing how each of those notes of the G major scale sounds alongside the tonic, which is what we call the first note of the scale, which is G. Okay, let's go ahead and play scale interval. Okay, good. And make sure as you're playing that you're really being careful of your hand position. Make sure we're not collapsing the wrists. That'll really cause your fingers to be out of tune, and it's difficult to control where they are if your wrist is collapsed. And then also make sure that you're really being careful of holding your bow correctly and gently every time that you play. The violin bow should be held very, very gently with no tension at all. So don't be squeezing the bow or pressing it into the string. Even on the G string, you want to have some gentleness in your hold. You do need to push a little harder on the G string, however. So as you're playing on the G string or the lower strings, put a little bit more weight into the bow. Just don't overdo it. Violin doesn't take a lot of weight. Let's go ahead and move on now to the song on this page. Number 13, this is a song called Chester. This song is from the Revolutionary War era, so it's a very, very old song by William Billings, and a beautiful, beautiful melody. This one has slurs in it, so you're going to use nice full bows, and when you've got the curvy line connecting two notes, remember those are on the same bow stroke without stopping, unless they have staccatos on them. So you do have some hooked bowings. That's when you have the curved line connecting two notes, but they're also marked staccato. When you do that, you stop the bow in between those notes. For example, measure 5 right after the retake. Try that, please. Try that with me. Ready? And. So you just stop the bow between them, but then you keep it moving in the same direction. We call that hooked. And hooked bows most often are going to be on up bows, but you can do the hooks on down bows as well. Make sure that you're paying attention to whether there are dots or not. And in any case, when you have the curved line between two notes, it is on the same bow direction that you play those two notes. All right, let's play Chester. That does it for page 5. Next page we'll move on to G major in a different octave. So you'll be back on the A string, little bit of D string, and then up on the E string for the next page. Good luck and happy practicing.